Hello and welcome to the Wonder Women podcast. My name is Katie Freeman and I'm your host. Every Wednesday and Friday, I bring you an interview of a female or non-binary maker of all kinds of makers from all over the world. Today's guest is Laura Morrison, who is an art author, but she is a published author. She is also a crafter of all kinds of fabric work. I think predominantly fabric work, but also paper craft. So she's not the first author I've had on the podcast, but I would say she's probably the first person who's had like author as her job, if you want to call it job, more so. And she also has a creative podcast. So happy to have Laura on today and bring you something maybe a little bit different. Before we hop into the interview with Laura, I want to give a big shout out and thanks to the patrons over on Patreon. So thank you so much. Kevin, Lefty's Woodshop, Christy, Twisted Twine, Christina B, Jeremy Speece, Sammy, Go Sammy Lee, Sven, Dwarf Size Workshop, Rachel, Moody Makes, Bonnie, Toolmom Bonnie, toolmomstore.com, Laura, Oakley Soap Company, Mary Lou, Made by Mary Lou, Amy, Bison Valley Carving, Dan and Kelly, Reclaim Living Store, Brandy, Studio, Obey, Kathy, One Girl and Her Tools, Ellen, Little Bear Furniture, and Ethan, Carter Design. So thank you all so very much for your ongoing and continued support, helping me to produce 2 episodes a week every week. Before we hop into the interview, one short announcement or reminder that this Saturday, so tomorrow, at 9:30 a.m. Central Standard Time, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, will be a virtual hangout for the patrons. So all those people I just listed will have access to that Zoom link and be able to come hang out. And if you hop on it quickly and join as a patron, you also can join in on the virtual hangout, just chatting about what's on our benches, what's going on. It's been a while since I've had one. Like, it's definitely been a hot minute. So it will just be fun to catch up with everybody, see what everyone's working on, and see, what's coming up for the summer, what exciting things are coming up. So that is the plan. And I hope to see all of you there. Including some new faces, hopefully. So without further ado, here is Laura Morrison. So I always start by having my guests introduce themselves. So when you are ready to do so, you can go ahead and do that.
Oh, okay, sounds good. My name is Laura Morrison. I'm a writer and podcaster. I write fiction, speculative fiction mostly. I have a sci-fi novel called Grimbargo, a novella called Come Back to the Swamp. I have a few short stories, 2 short horror stories published by Black Spot Books, and 1 short sci-fi story published by Spaceboy Books. And I have the big one for me is my my fairy tale middle grade series. Is the first book in that series is coming out this summer on July 6th. And also this month, being National Poetry Month, I also have a tie-in poetry book that connects to my upcoming series. So That's coming out this month. And also, of course, I have my podcast Space Mantis, which is it's a space opera podcast.
So you're gonna have to explain to me what space opera is.
It's like it's The way I describe it is sort of like silly sci-fi. Like it's in space and
Mm-hmm.
there's sci-fi elements, but it's mostly just like not serious. It's more silly. I don't know if that would offend other other space opera people, but that's how I define it. That's
Okay.
certainly how my space opera works anyway.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to kind of just know your story, starting like way back at the beginning when you were a kid, and like how the progression of how you got to here.
Okay, cool, cool. So I have always been a maker of things and a big reader. So before I had kids, I would say my whole life I was primarily a crafter and secondarily a writer. But then when I had kids, that sort of flipped
Hmm.
because because all of a sudden I was a stay-at-home mom and I had both of my babies are big snugglers, so I always had a sleeping baby on me. And you can't do a lot of crafting one-handed, but you can, like, if you're you know serious enough about it, you can be a writer one-handed. You can do
Mm-hmm.
a lot of typing one-handed. So that's why I got into finally taking my writing seriously. Was I just was sitting around a lot with babies sleeping on me. And so, yeah, I've before that I was and though of course uh this isn't a big focus in my life anymore, but just since you are a maker podcast, and so much of my life was other making before it was making books, I did just about everything, and I still do to some degree, like knitting and weaving and spinning yarn and beading and origami, just like so many like paper centric things. Bookbinding is a huge one in my life still, like the old fashioned bookbinding with all of the old fashioned techniques and stuff. I love that. I've made a few of my books into super fancy hardcovers actually. Um, and then my dad is a woodworker and my father-in-law is a blacksmith, so I've dabbled in those, but I don't have the shops at my house,
Mm-hmm.
so I can only do so much there. Um, but yeah, writing is my big one, writing and podcasting. And gosh, I was rambling there, so I lost track of your question. Does that cover it? I'm not
Well, I guess.
I'm more of a writer than a talker.
I guess. I mean, how did you like? I guess did you go to college? What'd you go to college for?
Mm.
Um,
I went to college for, I have a degree in applied ecology and environmental science, actually. So not writing, technical writing, like science
mm-hmm.
writing. Sure, I can write that sort of thing, but through my training. But as far as fiction, the way I studied fiction is just by nonstop reading, like my entire life. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel my philosophy, uh, and the philosophy of some writers, also not at all other writers, is studying some things too rigidly and learning too many of the rules can sometimes get in the way of your creativity.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that up to a point, I think. Like, as long as you've read a ton of books, you know how to do stuff. You know how stories work.
Mm-hmm.
You it's worked out for me anyway. Um so yeah, I didn't study it, but I unofficially studied it nonstop. Um And for my novella that I wrote, Come Back to the Swamp, it's all about, like, the main character is a ecologist, and she's studying in a swamp. And I used to uh the work that I did getting rid of invasive species and tracking turtles in swamps in New Jersey, that was like the story never would have happened if I hadn't had that experience. So my environmental studies definitely have figured into a lot of my writing in a lot of ways. I
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of swamp witches, so a lot of swampy stuff. Yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah, I didn't. Are turtles an invasive species?
No, no, that's
Oh,
the plants. The
ah,
there probably are invasive turtles, but maybe. But no, I got rid of invasive plants in the swamps, and then separately, also while I was out there, tracked the turtles that were one of the species was endangered and the other species was threatened out in New
Mm-hmm.
Jersey. So just tracking the numbers of those and making sure those populations were doing all right.
Yeah, that actually sounds really fascinating.
Oh, it
We
was
have
so
a
fun.
we have a a pond behind our house, like a rather large pond. It's kind of the neighborhood pond.
Uh-huh.
And so right now is really fun turtle watching because
Oh
they've
yeah.
like all woke up, and they're like going out onto every possible like log or dock and just sunning themselves, and it's kind of fun to just watch that. And usually they come up into our yards and lay their eggs. And so, it's always like, okay, which yard's going to have like the baby turtles hatching this
Aw.
year, so
Oh,
that's
that's
always
so
fun.
sweet. So
But
fun.
yeah, super fun. Um, and all kinds of wildlife that comes with that, geese and
Yeah.
ducks and frogs and
Yeah.
all kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah. My yard is surrounded by a lot of pesticide sprayers, so we don't have much. I personally don't. We have bees, and
Mm-hmm,
I do monarch butterfly stuff. I raise monarch butterflies, so we are very anti-pesticide ourselves, but
mm-hmm.
not so much the neighborhood.
Yeah, I also understand that as well.
Yeah.
Hey, friends, I wanted to tell you about an awesome brand I discovered that you might love as well. Have you ever spent a ton of money on clothing that was supposed to be high performance, only for it to end up at the back of your closet because it just doesn't fit right? I personally hate when this happens. I get excited about a new pair of work boots, and then I'm disappointed to find out they just weren't designed for me. Discovering Athena Outfitters was a game changer for me. Athena Outfitters is a quality workwear brand for hardworking women. All of their items are handpicked to meet the needs of women in the trades, not just sized down versions of items designed for men. They've got great workwear essentials like comfortable, soft, and safety toe boots, and options for my active lifestyle when I'm off the clock as well. Shopping with Athena Outfitters saves me time and energy because I always know I'm getting a high quality product that also looks and feels great. Next time you're looking for gear with grit, check out AthenaOutfitters.com. That is ATHENA Outfitters.com, and use special code at checkout MM15 to get a 15% discount because you listen to the Maker Mom podcast.
Yep.
So you did, I mean, so you had, I guess, were you always doing something creative outside of like your professional career?
Yes. Yes, definitely. Like even when I was in college, my roommate, she also was the same program as I was. She's a teacher now, but she also had a degree in environmental science. And like we that's where I made my first quilt actually
Mm.
was in college. Other people were going to parties and we were sitting in our room quilting. And that I also we did a lot of writing, like a lot of creative writing. We wrote stories and showed them to each other. And that is where my first well not, the first book I wrote, but now it's the one that is being that's coming out this summer. It's the first book of my fairy tale series. We That's where I started writing. That was with my roommate in college. And yeah, I've always been making stuff. I'm always in the middle of some sort of project, usually
Mm-hmm.
yarny or fabric or paper related.
Mm-hmm. Um, so why the draw to sci-fi?
Sci-fi, well, actually, fantasy is kind of more my thing, but sci-fi was the first. I had a sci-fi book published first, and then my space opera. Oh well, gosh, that's a okay big story there. But um, so for the sci-fi one, a friend of mine had started a sci-fi publish like a small press, and offered me the chance to write a book for them. So I just said yes. And I've always loved sci-fi, but it's never, I feel like in a lot of ways it is similar to fantasy in that I've always sort of seen it as they're sort of the same thing in a lot of ways, except sci-fi, instead of being in like the semi pseudo medieval past, it's in
Mhm.
the future, of course, generally. And instead of magic, it's just science that doesn't exist yet. So it's just like the science is sort of
Mhm.
magic, and it's if you just like exchange the the past for the future and the magic for the science, you pretty much have the same thing. So
Mhm.
in that way they're sort of in my mind the same anyway. That, and again, that would probably annoy certain purists in both genres.
I don't.
um
I'm not. I'm not like a huge reader. Like I do audiobooks and stuff,
mhm.
but I
Oh yeah.
am like I am definitely like a huge like consumer of fantasy and sci-fi television
Mhm.
and movies. Like that's that's how I unwind. That's how I escape, right?
Yes.
Uh
Mhm.
so um I would agree, though obviously I'm not a writer, but I would agree that fantasy and sci-fi are very similar.
Yeah.
Um like it's both stuff that really doesn't exist
Yeah.
like in reality.
Mhm.
But yet it makes complete sense when you see it all put together in the story.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yeah, and my podcast, how that came to be. Oh, and actually, speaking of audiobooks, my novella Come Back to the Swamp is an audiobook. It
Mhm.
was made into an audiobook. So there you go for that. But that's all I listen to is audiobooks these days. I don't have time to read because of all of the other stuff I've got going on. So I listen to just tons of audiobooks while I'm like doing laundry or something. It's
Mhm.
kind of a depressing place to be, but whatever. Um, but my podcast, so I had written, again, Come Back to the Swamp, my novella, back to that. And in that, which is mostly a current day, like it's called fantasy realism. So it's like mostly real life, but just with little elements of magic
Okay.
thrown in. Like that's where one of my swamp witches is in that book. And there is a a space opera TV show that is referenced a few times in that book. And I have some writer friends online, and like we were reading each other's novellas for this contest that we were all in for novella writing, and they had mentioned, like a few of them had mentioned that they liked the idea of the show Space Mantis that was in my other book. And we just all kind of started brainstorming a little bit off and on, and we're just talking about how it would be fun if, wouldn't it be cool if it really was a show, and wouldn't it be cool if we somehow could make something like this. But of course we can't make a show, but we can make a podcast. And so
Mhm.
we just that just sort of eventually formed. And so they are all voice actors in it, as well as other creative type people that I've met along the line, because there's a big cast in it actually. But so like people from both of the publishing, both of the small presses that I'm associated with, Black Spot Books and Spaceboy Books, there are people from both sets
Mhm.
that are also uh voice actors in it. And it's just one of those things that like you connect with people and they like what you're doing, and you ask if they
Mhm.
want to be a part of it, and then things just happen.
Right. So like a total collaborative
Hmm.
effort.
Yep, I love collaborative creative projects. I love
Mhm.
co-writing. I love this podcast thing. It's just so fun to work with other creative people on things that everyone is like so many people have so many different gifts and talents, and just pile it all together, and it usually makes
Mhm.
something pretty fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing within the like more like physical maker space as well.
Hmm.
Like meeting people, you may meet them like online or via like Instagram, but it's very easy to fall into like, okay, let's collaborate together and make something. Like it's just
Yes.
And conferences is also another fun space where it's just like
Mhm.
so many ideas are generated just from
Yes.
like talking with each other.
Yeah, it's so nice to connect with creative people, and the internet is so great for that. It's just I never would have met the people I've met, I don't think, just especially because I'm an introvert,
Yeah.
just, like, hanging out in my house, like, how like, there could be somebody 2 blocks over that was into whatever I was into, and I'd never know it, so thank goodness for the internet.
Exactly. Exactly. So how many kids do you have?
I have 2 kids.
All right. And how old
Yep.
are they?
They are not they're 10, sorry, and 13.
Okay. All
Yep.
right. So they've kind of grown up with you being in this creative space.
Yep,
Um,
definitely.
what, I mean, you talked about a little bit when they were, kids sleeping on you, but how have
Mhm.
you like continued that process as they've grown?
Like, how have I kept up with being with the creative
Yeah.
stuff?
Yeah.
Well, so first of all, it's so helpful that I have a supportive spouse. My husband is just super, he was raised by an artist. His dad is a blacksmith, and so having an artist in the family, he was raised to value art, like even if you're not making a ton of money off of it, it's a
Hmm.
valuable thing, and artists are an asset to the society, whatever the art, whether it's, writing or some other form of creativity. And so he's always been very supportive, and that's been lovely. And also we live in a place with a low cost of living, so that's nice. Um, but yeah, my kids, as far as like, since he is definitely the primary money maker, we do have more of a system where I do the house stuff, he does the work, because like otherwise how is this going to work out?
Hmm.
But so I've sort of evolved, especially since the kids are older now, and this is much more possible. I have evolved this sort of second shift life where I usually sleep till 11. I stay up till 3 or 4 to do my writing. Like once my husband is in bed and the kids are in bed,
Hmm.
I have like 3, 4 hours when everyone else is asleep at night where I just write and do like whatever audio editing for the podcast. And has been the best way to do it. I've tried through the day to like get little pieces of writing in
Hmm.
here and there between whatever, but it's so nice to have the focus in the middle of the night. And now that again my kids are older and can give themselves breakfast and wake up,
Right.
and they're doing virtual learning this year, so starting school on their own without me having to be there to tell them to do it. It's been that's what how things have worked out.
Hmm.
It's the best way I can get things done these days.
What are their like? Do they probably don't know any different as far as like this maybe not being the route that like every parent takes
Yeah.
for a career type thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess I wonder if they've thought about it. I know they see like they, make comparisons to other families, and I think they really like that I'm at home. That's like the big thing that for them, I'm a writer, so I'm at home.
Hmm.
And they really like that aspect of it. I'm not sure how much they think about it generally though. Um, they know that since I'm so busy, our house is a lot messier than a lot of their friends. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's
Yeah.
just the side stuff that they are more aware of.
Yeah. I mean, in the I have multiple jobs that I do, but all of them are basically from home and home based. So
Mhm.
yeah, and my kids are younger, but they've definitely latched onto that fact of like it's rare when I have to like go somewhere for
Yeah.
work. And so it's like, well, mom's always home. Like
Mhm.
um which also means that the lines like get blurred, I guess, as far as
Very.
like, well, you're home, mom, so you can do like this, and this. And it's like, I'm
Yeah.
home, but I'm working.
And which is why I stay up till 4 in the morning. Yep.
Yeah. Um, where else? I mean, how else are you still fitting in like creative stuff that's not like for work, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Uh, for with my both of my kids are also pretty creative, so it's been helpful to like just focus on things that they're both into. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
time you can, get creative stuff in through the day if your kids are also into it. So you can have like it's not a separate time, it's a together time. So like my older one is super into beading. She's made some really pretty bead necklaces, and she's I would say she'll probably be more of an artist. I've
Mm-hmm.
never had the discipline to actually study a thing. Like if I can't do it quickly, if I can't learn it within a week, then I
Mm-hmm.
just don't have the patience for it generally for the crafts that I do. But she is like really into drawing realistic things in a way that I never could do. She's 13 and she's already drawing much better than I ever could, or than I ever have.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose I probably could, but I just again don't have the
Yeah.
time. Um, so like drawing, I love things like just like pen and ink, like making geometric
Mm-hmm.
designs, that sort of thing. So we sit around drawing together, or my younger one, she's more into like 3D stuff. Like she really likes the glue gun, and if you give her a bunch of like random stuff, she'll create this like glue gun centric sculpture out of whatever. And so that's fun. She she made me a stuffed animal recently out of like the cut up jeans and just junk she glued onto it in a really cute little way. So that was, yeah, it's just you go with what they like through the
Mm-hmm.
day if possible. And
Mm-hmm.
that gets you more creativity through the day.
Right.
Yeah.
Do they you mentioned both your father-in-law is a blacksmith,
Hmm.
your dad is a woodworker, like, so do you as a family get to interact in those spaces ever as well?
Well, I was recently, because I keep, through the summer, I raise monarch butterflies to help with that population. My dad, I was visiting my parents, and he was helping me to make these really nice butterfly houses so that, like, when they're outside, they don't get the cocoons or whatever don't get eaten by predators. And also, I forgot my mom. My mom is an amazing weaver. She has all these spinning wheels and looms, and she's really done a ton of very nice weaving. So I definitely come from creative parents, but and she's gotten me a lot more into weaving. I was the one who actually introduced her to spinning, and from there she got into weaving and stuff. So it's like I started her on it, but since I'm kind of more flighty and I flip from project to project, she stuck with it. So she pretty quickly got a lot better than I was. Um, and yeah, a few times ago, I was over there trying out one of her looms and just making a really cool little belt. So I dabble in their stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the
uh,
blacksmithing, my father-in-law, they live farther away from me, so we don't see them much. And the kids do more of blacksmithing than I do because I have arthritis in my I have arthritis that for the most part's in remission, but my wrists still bother me,
mm,
and blacksmith is big hammering stuff. So
yes.
it's like what it is. So
Yeah, exactly.
so I don't do too much of that.
Hi, makers. Today's episode is brought to you by toolmomstore.com. Tool Mom and Company is for all ages, genders. They have what you need for your one-stop tool-related merchandise of gifts and clothing. The products are fun, fashionable, one of a kind. In fact, I have two of the mugs. One has a circular saw with flames coming off of it. It says "Go Girl." Another one has the definition of a tool chick. Both of them are super awesome, and I have coffee out of them almost every morning. So check out toolmomstore.com or find them on Instagram at toolmombonnie. You can receive an extra 20% off at checkout by using the code MAKERMOM. So where you've got some stuff coming up, you mentioned the book coming out, the podcast is going. How often do you do the podcast?
The podcast, season 1 we did once every 2 weeks. We're on hiatus right now working on season 3. I'm sorry, season 2. I'm writing the scripts for that. I've written about half of them, and then we're just getting all of the voice acting together for those, and I'm finishing up the scripts. And that's like, it's a bit of a production. I don't really do much of the audio editing. There's a guy who is who's helping out with that. He's also a voice actor in the second season. He does more of that. I do like just the very basic audio editing, like just normalizing the sound and stuff. He's the one who makes it like all sound good. Like we have people recording, we have someone in Singapore and just like all across the US, and there's someone in England and Denmark, and we're just like from all over the planet, and we're all recording at different times. Sometimes, like in the first season, we had an episode where like some of the recordings were from like years ago, and some were from like a few like weeks before it was all put together. But our audio guy makes it sound just like everyone's in the same room together at the same time, and it's magic what some people can do with
I was gonna say, like, yeah, how do you do that? How do you make it seem like
I don't know,
conversation going, because I imagine, like, to me, when you're talking about this, it's like, because I don't listen to any other podcasts like that. Most podcasts I listen to are like this interview style.
Yeah.
So, but to me, it sounds like old school, like radio shows type stuff, right?
Yeah, it's like that sort of thing, except all spliced together.
Yeah. That's got to take an immense amount of time.
It does. It's really a lot of time. I feel so fortunate that I have these people who are into this project, and I just really hope they stick it out long term. It's, I don't know. I love it. I'm really lucky.
Where do you hope to like go with the podcast? Like,
I feel like all we really want is just some people who are like genuinely into it. We're not out there to like become huge. We just want people to listen and really like it and see what happens from there. Like if it ever did get big, that would be great. But also just if there's a few people who dig it, that's also awesome. Yeah.
So. How was your first season received, do you think?
We definitely got a few people who seem to really like it. It was like sort of, none of us are podcast people. None of us came from the podcast world. So we're all book people for the most part. None of us knew how to do any of the podcast stuff. So it's just like hard to get the word out there. And there's so many podcasts out there. So I feel like the time between season 1 and season 2 is when I'm going to be focusing more on trying to get the word out. We just want to have like this solid season waiting there for anybody who will find it. And yeah, this summer is hopefully going to be when I'm going to be trying to be more formal about working on getting the word out about it. So yeah, not a huge audience, but there are people who like it. So that's a plus. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, it's like when I started this podcast, which, oh my gosh, this is almost 3 years ago now when I started this podcast. Like it was a good 2 years before it really started taking off, and and I believe it's taken off large in part because of the network I grew through like other stuff,
Mm-hmm.
like through my making. People who like follow me on social media and like my making would hear me say like, "Oh, this is who I'm talking to on the podcast." And then so it's just now kind of like organically growing where people are like who I have who have never interacted with me are being able to find it. So it's like
Yeah.
it's a journey.
Yeah, you have to really just enjoy it and stick with
Yes.
it and
Yes.
just hope for the best. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's a big thing with writing is you just have to really like it. Um, Much like podcasting.
Hmm.
And like odds are it's just not going to go anywhere, and but you still have to try, and if you like it you do it. And I just feel like there are more again, probably this is the same with podcasts as it is with the writing world in general. There are more talented people than there is a need for them or a market for them. So
Hmm.
the harder you try and the more you make, the better your chances. But it's not the most fair world for creative people. But I guess it never has been. In the old days, you had to be rich or know somebody rich to do it. And now you just have to luck out.
Hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's a valid point, though. Like, I would say in the world of fiction writing as a whole, I mean, there's a lot of authors out there, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like,
I know so many who are really talented. Like so many of the people who work on the Space Mantis podcast, they're pretty much all of them are writers. And I feel like all of them deserve more notice than they have. There are some really good books like that I've gone back to reread them, like I do Margaret Atwood or like Kurt Vonnegut or like the big
hmm.
names.
Hmm.
They're good writers, but they just aren't seen. You just have to luck out at a certain baseline level of talent. It's just luck from there, and
Hmm.
it's really it's a rough world.
Do you think, I don't think people are necessarily going away from reading, but I do feel like maybe libraries don't play as important of a role
Hmm.
in like the average, at least in the States, like in the
Yeah,
average uh, household as they once did.
I think that's true. I really feel like that's true. In my like little, bubble that I live in, it's not so much true, but generally that is the feeling I get, that it's just libraries aren't that big a thing. Even I would say reading feels like it's not so much a thing for anyone anymore, or not
Yeah.
for anyone, but a lot of people aren't too much into reading anymore, either because they just aren't interested or because life is just so busy. Like I'm a writer and I haven't read a physical book in months, which is huge for me, but I have been listening to a lot of audiobooks.
So yeah, I
So,
think I mean, I feel like that's a general direction things are going because like you can listen to a book while driving. So like if you
mm-hmm,
live in a big city and you have to commute every day or whatever,
mm-hmm,
like that's one way to consume what you once maybe enjoyed sitting down and like reading that physical book.
yeah. Yeah, nobody has downtime anymore. It's
Yeah.
so sad. And I, as a bookbinder and a appreciator of books as art themselves, I think it's really sad. It's really sad that like physical books aren't much of a thing anymore for so many people. Um, I finally broke down and got a Kindle like a month ago, but I was so against even ebooks. I was like, no, never, never. But they serve a purpose. Mostly just do nonfiction on ebooks, though. I feel like fiction, especially fantasy, has to be a physical book. I have strong views on these things.
We're a split household. I do audiobooks mainly just I think I would enjoy reading more if I wasn't like I'm just in general a slow reader. And
Hmm. Oh, me
so
too. Me
like
too. That's hard.
so I get frustrated because I'm like, oh, I could be like so much further through this.
Hmm.
So audiobooks tend to fit me in that way.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas but my wife enjoys the physical book. So it's started to be if I listen to one that I'm oh, she has to read this, then I then buy the physical book so I can get
Yes. Yes. We have that same, my husband and I have that same sort of thing. Yeah. There's many times I've bought I've started with the audiobook and then I've needed to get the physical book too for sharing
Yeah.
with people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of, there's at least 5 I can think of right now that we've got both versions just because of how we read our stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny. It's funny. I hadn't heard of that being a thing with anybody else. That's cool.
Well, the author or the person who sells those things makes money twice off of
Yes.
our household.
And they deserve it.
Yes.
It's a book that's good enough for that, then
Yes.
then they've
Yes.
earned it.
So I'm looking at the time. And I would say we're kind of getting close to it. So
Mhm.
I want to give you a chance to let people know how can they find you and all that stuff.
Gotcha. My website is a good place, lauramorrisonwrites.com, Lauramorrison, as you'd think, WRITES.com. Let me see here, my website, yeah. Amazon, all my stuff can be found on Amazon, except the podcast, of course, Space Mantis podcast, that can be found at all the podcast places. I think those are the best things.
Okay.
The best things I can point you to. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for chatting with me today.
Thank you. It was so nice to talk to you.
Yeah. All right. So, again, that was Laura Morrison. I'll include the links on how you can follow along with her in the show notes or the description for today's episode. You can find that on whatever podcast app you listen on, or if you're watching this on YouTube, check out the description down below. As always, if you're enjoying the podcast, if you're new to the podcast and you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure you hit that subscribe button and tell a friend about the podcast. Tell a friend about a maker you've learned about that you just were blown away by their journey. I know I'm blown away by everybody I get to talk to. I really, truly do enjoy doing this podcast and getting to learn everybody's stories. Also, head over to Instagram, follow along with at Wonder Women Pod. And again, women is with an EN, not an AN. So Wonder Women Pod, follow along over there. Hop on over to Patreon, join as a patron so you can join us for the virtual hangout on Saturday. That's patreon.com/Wonder Women Pod there as well. And again, women is EN, not AN. And when I'm not talking to all these fabulous people and learning about their stories, getting into making, you can find me designing and making furniture and other home decor over at freemanfurnishings.com and at Freeman Furnishings pretty much across all of the social media platforms. So LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Pinterest. I'm active on a daily basis though on Instagram and TikTok, so that's where you can see what's going on my workbench currently. I can tell you right now, it's a heck of a lot of bat houses, or what new dance moves I have gleamed to share with everybody. So hope to see you over there. Reach out, say you found me through the podcast. I love meeting people that way. Again, that's at Freeman Furnishings. All right, it's Friday. I hope you all enjoy a wonderful weekend and get out and make something. And I will see you all next week with 2 brand new episodes.